They called her weak. They cast her out. Pregnant and abandoned, Selene was left to die in the cold shadows of the forest. But when the feared Alpha King found her, he did not see a broken Omega. He saw his fated mate. Now, as whispers of betrayal and war close in, a rejected girl must rise as a queen. But can love strong enough to heal her scars survive a world determined to tear it apart? The moon hung like a silver crown over the clearing, casting its pale glow across the gathered pack. The night air was thick with excitement, charged with the promise of destiny. Every wolf stood in silence, waiting for the sacred call of the mate bond. Selene stood at the edge of the circle, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Her heart pounded as though it would leap out of her chest. She had prayed for this night, prayed for acceptance, prayed that the moon goddess had not forgotten her. All her life, she had been the outcast, an Omega with little strength, often mocked, often pushed aside. But tonight was different. Tonight, the mate bond would reveal itself, and perhaps for once, fate would smile on her. Her eyes searched the crowd, hopeful and trembling. Some stared back at her with pity, others with disgust. She swallowed hard, pretending not to notice, pretending not to care. Inside, hope still burned. Her chest rose and fell as the Alpha chanted the ancient words. The wind carried the energy of the goddess across the gathering. Pairs were matched, bonds ignited, mates pulled together as though by invisible threads. Selene held her breath. Her skin prickled, her heart screamed, waiting for the spark. Then, suddenly, it came. A surge of heat shot through her veins. Her soul trembled. Her wolf howled inside her. She felt it, clear, undeniable. Her mate was here. She turned, her eyes locking on him. It was the beta, her secret love, the man she had trusted with her heart, the man she had believed cared for her beyond rank, beyond rules. Tears sprang to her eyes, not of sorrow, but joy. Finally, she thought. Finally, the goddess has blessed me. Her lips parted, a shaky smile breaking across her face. She took a step toward him, her heart already surrendering. But then, his eyes narrowed. He froze, his jaw clenched in visible disgust. The crowd murmured, "Sensei," among the shift. Selene stopped in her tracks, confusion flashing across her features. The beta let out a harsh, humorless laugh. "No," he said coldly, his voice echoing through the silence. The words struck her like a blade. Her breath caught in her throat. "What?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The beta raised his chin, sneering at her. "You? My mate? The moon goddess must be mocking me." Gasps rippled through the gathering. Selene's knees weakened, but she forced herself to stand tall. Tears blurred her vision. "You can't deny the bond," she stammered. "I can, and I will," he snapped. "You are nothing but a weak, pathetic Omega. You will never be worthy of me." The words sliced into her chest, each one heavier than the last. Her wolf whimpered inside her, the bond straining, breaking. Her heart shattered in front of them all. Laughter erupted from the crowd. Cruel whispers slithered through the night air. She thought she'd be chosen? The goddess must be punishing her. Selene's breath came in ragged gasps. The world tilted, the ground unsteady beneath her feet. She turned to her beta lover, searching his eyes, begging for mercy. But he looked at her with only hatred, with only shame. "You disgust me," he spat, his voice like venom. The Alpha did not intervene. None came to her defense. She was alone, surrounded by wolves who relished her humiliation. Her throat tightened as sobs threatened to break free. She couldn't stay. Not another second. With her heart bleeding, Selene turned and ran. Her bare feet carried her across the dirt, into the shadows of the forest. Branches whipped her skin, but she didn't stop. Tears blurred her path, hot and endless. Every step tore her chest open wider. Her wolf whimpered, aching, broken. The rejection burned like fire in her veins. Her lungs screamed for air. Her legs trembled with exhaustion. Still she ran, away from the leasts, otter away from the betrayal. Her beta's words echoed in her mind, cruel and unrelenting, pathetic, unworthy, disgusting. She stumbled, falling to her knees against the damp earth. Her hands sank into the soil as sobs finally broke loose. The forest was silent, except for her cries, her tears mixed with the dirt, her chest heaving. How could fate be so cruel? How could the goddess be so merciless? She had given her heart to him, trusted him, believed him, and in return he had crushed her before all. Her hands clutched at her chest as if she could hold the pieces of her heart together. Her body shook violently, grief tearing through her like claws. Her wolf whimpered again, curling inward, retreating. Selene dragged herself deeper into the forest, desperate for distance, desperate to hide. The shadows closed in, whispering with her misery. The cold bit at her skin, but she didn't care. Every breath was pain. Every heartbeat was despair. Her legs finally gave way, and she collapsed against the roots of an ancient tree. Her hair clung to her damp cheeks. Her lips trembled as words barely escaped. A sharp pain struck her lower belly, sudden and merciless. Her hands flew to her stomach. The realization struck her like thunder. The truth she had carried alone for days, hidden, unspoken. Her voice cracked, broken and raw. "I'm pregnant," she whispered into the night. The forest swallowed her words. And then silence. The night was heavy, thick with silence after her broken whisper. Her body curled weakly at the base of the tree, hands pressing against her stomach as though to shield the fragile life inside. The forest around her seemed to listen, as though even the wind pitied her. Her tears had slowed, leaving salty trails across her pale cheeks, but the ache inside had only deepened. Pregnant. The word echoed in her mind, a secret she had guarded alone, now slipping free into the lonely night. Her breath shuddered, chest heaving with quiet sobs. The cold seeped into her skin, chilling her bones, yet she clung to herself tightly, as if her embrace could protect both, her and her unborn child. The forest was no place for weakness, yet here she lay, fragile and broken. Leaves rustled in the distance, a faint crunch of footsteps. Selene stiffened, her heart stuttering in her chest. For a moment she dared to hope. Perhaps the moon goddess had not fully abandoned her. Perhaps someone had followed, someone who cared. The footsteps drew closer, sharp, deliberate, and familiar. Her eyes lifted, blurred with tears, to meet the figure emerging from the shadows. It was him, the beta, her former lover, her mate who had rejected her only hours before. Her body trembled, torn between longing and terror. For one desperate heartbeat, hope tried to rise again. Maybe he regretted it. Maybe he had come to find her, to take back the cruel words, to gather her into his arms and promise to stay. Her lips parted, ready to whisper his name. But the look on his face silenced her. There was no love in his eyes, no regret, only disdain, sharper than any blade. His voice cut through the night, low and venomous. "You're still here? Pathetic." The words struck like a whip. Selene's hand pressed harder against her stomach, her voice fragile. I need you to listen. Please." He stepped closer, sneering, the moonlight catching on his cruel smile. "I have nothing to listen to. You disgust me more than ever." Her throat tightened, but she forced the words past her lips. "I'm pregnant." The confession shattered the silence, heavy and trembling. His eyes flickered, shock, anger, then something darker. "Pregnant," he repeated, the word bitter on his tongue. Her tears welled again, shimmering in the moonlight. "Yes, yours." For the briefest moment she searched his face for a crack of warmth, for even a flicker of responsibility, but instead he laughed. a hollow, merciless laugh that echoed through the forest like broken glass. You think that matters? You think Crying my child makes you worthy? You are nothing, Selene. Nothing. The words pierced deeper than any rejection. Her arms wrapped around herself as though she could protect the life inside from his cruelty. Her voice shook, but she tried again. Don't leave me like this. Don't leave us. I can't do this alone. But he only leaned closer, his breath hot and poisonous. You will, and you'll suffer every second of it. If you dare come back to the pack, if you even speak my name. He stopped, his eyes narrowing with cold finality. I'll make sure the Alpha rips you apart himself. Her lips parted in silent horror, her heart shattering all over again. He straightened, stepping back into the shadows, already turning away. The forest seemed to close around him, swallowing him whole, leaving only silence in his wake. Selene reached out weakly, her hand trembling in the air, as though she could pull him back. But he was gone, gone like the love she had once believed in. Her hand fell limply to her side, her body sinking into the earth. Her chest ached with every breath, heavy with despair. Her stomach tightened with another sharp pang, her unborn child reminding her that she was not truly alone. Her tears returned, falling silently, endlessly. The forest seemed darker now, the trees towering like cold judges above her. The weight of his betrayal pressed down until she could barely breathe. Every word he had spat at her clung like chains, suffocating. Unworthy. Pathetic. Nothing. She curled into herself, whispering broken prayers into the night. Prayers for strength. Prayers for her baby. Prayers that someone, anyone, might hear her. But the night answered with silence. Silence and the whisper of leaves in the wind. Her body trembled, exhaustion pulling her deeper into the roots of the earth. Her eyes fluttered shut, though her tears still flowed. In the distance, an owl called, its cry haunting, mournful, as if the forest itself grieved with her. Her lips moved, cracked and dry, shaping words only the shadows heard. I'll protect you, she whispered to the soul. Life within her, no matter what. I won't let them break you too. The promise was weak, but it was all she had left. Her body ached, her soul throbbed, but a spark of defiance burned faintly beneath the wreckage of her heart. Her beta's footsteps were gone. His cruelty lingered, and she was left alone, broken, but still breathing. The night deepened, pressing down on her like a shroud. Her strength faltered, her vision blurred. Pain pulsed through her belly, sharper now, relentless. Her fingers dug into the soil, nails breaking, as she fought to stay conscious. Every breath was a battle, every heartbeat a struggle. Her wolf whimpered, faint, almost silent, but still alive within her. Darkness crowded at the edges of her vision. The forest swayed, twisting, blurring into shadows. Her voice trembled once more, a final whisper before the night claimed her strength. Please, don't leave me here. Her body sagged against the roots, her eyelids heavy, and then silence wrapped around her once again. The forest was silent, but for Selene's shallow breaths. Her body pressed against the roots of the tree, her strength fading. Her lips moved in weak prayer, but the night swallowed her words. The air shifted suddenly, sharp and dangerous, carrying the scent of bloodlust. Her wolf stirred faintly, a warning trembling in her chest. Shadows moved between the trees. Pairs of glowing red eyes broke the darkness, one after another. Her heart lurched. Rogues. Hungry, snarling beasts with no loyalty, no law. They crept from the undergrowth, their teeth glistening in the moonlight. Her body froze, instinct urging her to flee, but her legs refused to obey. She was too weak, too broken, too alone. The rogues closed in, their growls vibrating through the earth. One lunged forward, snapping its jaws inches from her arm. Selene gasped, curling protectively over her stomach. Terror clawed up her throat. Not for herself, but for the tiny life inside her. She pressed her body against the ground, desperate to shield it. A low, triumphant snarl rose from the rogues, circling her like prey. Their claws scraped the dirt, their eyes gleaming with hunger. Her tears blurred her vision. This was it. This was how she would die. Not at the hands of her pack, not from her lover's betrayal, but torn apart in the wilderness. She whispered to the baby inside her, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry. I tried. I tried to be strong for you." The first rogue lunged. The air split with the sound of a deep, thunderous growl. The ground trembled beneath her body. A presence descended, fierce and overwhelming, shaking the night itself. The rogues froze mid-strike, their ears flattening, their growls faltering. From the shadows emerged a towering figure, the Alpha King, Kalen. The name whispered in fear across every pack, the ruler who commanded power like no other. His eyes glowed like molten gold in the moonlight. His aura pressed against the forest, suffocating, wild, untamed. Even the rogues trembled, but hunger made them reckless. The first rogue charged. Kalen moved faster than sight. A flash of claws, a snap of bone, and the rogue's body hit the ground lifeless. Another lunged, but Kalen caught its throat in his hand, crushing it with terrifying ease. Selene stared through blurred vision, half believing she had slipped into a dream. The king fought like a storm unleashed, each movement precise, merciless. Growls turned to whimpers as the rogues tried to retreat, but Kalen showed no mercy. One by one, he tore through them, his dominance absolute, his strength unmatched. The forest fell silent once more, littered with the still forms of the slain. Selene's chest heaved, her lips trembling as she tried to breathe. Her body pressed tighter against the earth, too weak to rise. Kalen turned at last, his golden gaze falling on her. The fury in his eyes softened, replaced by something unreadable. He stepped forward, his shadow stretching across her trembling body. Selene tried to push herself up, her arms shaking, but her strength failed. Don't come closer," she whispered, fear and defiance laced together. Her wolf stirred faintly within her, confused, unsettled. Kalen crouched beside her, the scent of his power wrapping around her like fire. Up close, he was even more overwhelming, every line of his body carved with strength, his presence impossible to ignore. Selene's heart pounded wildly, not with fear alone, but with something she could not name. His hand hovered above her, uncertain, then lowered with surprising gentleness. He scooped her into his arms as though she weighed nothing. Selene gasped, her hands pressing instinctively to his chest. The warmth of him seared her skin, and then, a spark. Faint but undeniable, her body jolted, her wolf stirring with recognition. Her breath caught. Mate. The word pulsed through her veins, though she tried to bury it. No. It couldn't be. Not again. Her eyes widened, searching his, but she shook her head quickly, denial flooding her. "You're wrong," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "There's no bond, not with you." But Kalen's eyes narrowed, his golden gaze piercing into her soul. He felt it too. The spark, the pull, the silent call between them. Her denial only deepened his certainty. His arms tightened around her, protective, unyielding. Selene struggled weakly, her voice breaking. "Put me down. Please, I can't survive another bond. Not again." Kalen's jaw clenched, his gaze lowering to her trembling form. She was fragile, broken, yet there was something fierce in her resistance, something that intrigued him, something that burned against the cold walls of his heart. The forest was still, the moonlight draping them in silver. Selene's tears clung to her lashes, her breath shuddering against his chest. Kalen lowered his head, his voice a deep growl, yet softer too, and she imagined it could be. "You carry my future." His words brushed against her ear, searing into her soul. Her heart faltered, her breath caught. "And I will protect it." The words still echoed, in her ears, heavy and impossible to escape. You carry my future, and I will protect it. Selene's heart beat painfully against her ribs as she lay cradled in Kaylin's arms. The forest stretched behind them, silent witness to what had just unfolded. She wanted to scream, to deny, to push him away, yet her body was too weak, her strength long stolen by pain and betrayal. His presence burned around her, fierce, overwhelming, but there was no malice in the way he held her. The Alpha King walked with steady strides, carrying her as if she were something fragile, something precious. The night gave way to torchlight as the distant walls of his palace rose from the darkness. Stone towers pierced the sky, their shadows long and cold against the moon. Her breath caught in her throat, awe and dread battling in her chest. She did not belong here. An Omega had no place in the Palace of Kings. The gates creaked open at his approach, and warriors lowered their heads in reverence to their Alpha. But when their eyes flicked to her, the air shifted. Whispers rippled like poison among them. What is he carrying? An Omega? Here? Their gazes cut like blades, sharp and full of disdain. Selene pressed closer to Kaylin's chest, wishing she could vanish into the folds of his cloak. He ignored them, his jaw set, his golden eyes burning with silent command. No one dared challenge him aloud. Inside, the palace loomed vast and intimidating. Torches lit the long corridors, shadows dancing on ancient stone. Selene felt small, swallowed whole by the sheer power of the place. Kaylin's grip never faltered as he carried her up the marble stairs, his steps echoing through the halls. At last, he entered a chamber rich with tapestries and heavy curtains. The warmth of a fire glowed in the hearth, casting a golden light across the room. He set her gently upon the bed, the softness startling after Night's of cold earth. Selene's fingers clutched the blanket, trembling. She expected commands, expected his voice to be as merciless as his reputation. Instead, his words were quiet. Rest. She stared at him, disbelief warring with exhaustion. His gaze softened, just for a moment, as though he saw more than an Omega before him. She shook her head faintly, her voice raw. I don't belong here. You do now, he answered firmly, leaving no room for argument. Her chest ached, torn between fear and something dangerously close to hope. A servant entered quietly, carrying a tray of food, but paused under Kaylin's hard stare. The man lowered the tray quickly and retreated, his eyes darting toward Selene with thinly veiled contempt. Selene's appetite had long vanished, but Kaylin sat beside her, lifting the plate as though it were his own task. He broke a piece of bread, holding it toward her. Her eyes widened. The Alpha King. Feeding her? I can manage, she whispered, shame coloring her cheeks. You need strength, he said simply, his tone final. Her hand shook as she accepted the food, her throat tightening as she forced herself to eat. Each bite felt like a battle, but his steady presence anchored her. When she faltered, he guided her gently, his patience disarming. The pack's whispers still echoed in her mind. Unworthy, Omega, weak, but his actions contradicted them all. Exhaustion weighed heavy on her bones, and soon the fire's warmth lulled her toward sleep. Her eyes closed reluctantly, still half afraid that waking would return her to the forest, alone and abandoned. But the mattress held her, and the Alpha King's shadow lingered near. Sleep claimed her in trembling waves. The night passed slowly, the palace hushed and still. Selene stirred restlessly, haunted by fragments of dreams, laughter, rejection, the sharp sting of betrayal. Her breathing quickened, her hands clutched the blanket as if it might shield her from memory. A warmth spread against her skin, unfamiliar yet steady. Her lashes fluttered, pulling her from the edges of nightmare. The fire had burned low, shadows flickering on the stone walls. She turned her head, heart stuttering at what she saw. Kaylin. The Alpha King sat beside her bed, his body leaned forward, his head bowed, and his hand. It was wrapped gently around hers. Her breath caught, her chest tightening in disbelief. The most feared wolf in all the kingdoms had fallen asleep at her side, holding her as though she were the only thing tethering him to the earth. Her lips parted in silent wonder, her heart trembling at the sight. The world outside remained cruel, but here, in this small moment, something forbidden began to bloom, something fragile, something terrifying, something she could not yet name. Her breath trembled in her chest as she stared at him, his hand warm against hers, even in sleep. The Alpha King, merciless, untouchable, feared by all, looked strangely human in that moment, his head tilted toward her, his grip gentle instead of commanding. Tears stung her eyes, unbidden, a wave of emotions crashing over her until the weight of silence was too heavy to bear. Her voice broke softly in the night. Why? Why would you do this? The sound stirred him, his lashes fluttering as he drew a slow breath. Kaelin's golden eyes opened, still heavy with sleep, but they sharpened instantly as they fell on her. You should rest, he said, his voice a low rumble, yet laced with concern. She shook her head, pulling her trembling hand from his. No, I can't. You don't understand. Her chest heaved as the words clawed their way out. The child I carry, it isn't yours. The truth hung between them like a curse, sharp and undeniable. Her gaze fell, shame burning her cheeks, waiting for anger, disgust, rejection, the things she had grown used to. But the silence stretched, steady and heavy. Finally, his answer came, firm and unyielding. I know. Her head jerked up, eyes wide, disbelief choking her. You know, Kaelin. His expression did not falter, his jaw strong, his eyes burning like embers. I could sense it. The bond may spark between us, but the blood in your womb does not carry mine. Still. His hand reached for hers again, enclosing it in his warmth. It doesn't matter. That child will be mine. I will raise it as my own, protect it as fiercely as I protect my crown. Selene's throat closed, her vision blurring with tears. No one had ever spoken such words to her, not her pack, not her mate who had betrayed her. And yet this man, feared by nations, declared himself father to the child of another. Her lips trembled as she tried to speak, but no words came. Kaelin leaned closer, his voice softer now, steady as stone. Selene, no one will harm you, or the life you carry, not while I breathe. Her tears spilled over, her shoulders shaking with the weight of release. For the first time since her rejection, she felt seen. Not as a weak Omega, not as a mistake, but as someone worthy of being fought for. Kaelin did not flinch as her sobs broke through her. Instead, he pulled her against his chest, holding her as if the world itself would shatter if he let go. Her cheek rested against the steady beat of his heart, a rhythm strong and grounding. She clung to him, her pain pouring out, her grief unraveling in his arms. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe she was not entirely alone. The fire crackled softly, wrapping the chamber in warmth as her cries faded into quiet tremors. Kaelin remained still, patient, his hand smoothing over her hair in wordless comfort. Her breathing slowed, her body heavy from the storm of emotion. When at last she looked up, her eyes red and swollen, his gaze caught hers. There was no mockery there, no judgment, only unwavering resolve. Her lips parted, barely above a whisper. Why? Why would you choose me? An Omega no one wanted? His eyes darken. His voice carrying the weight of conviction. Because I see what they never did. Strength isn't in rank, Selene. It's in surviving what should have destroyed you. And you are stronger than you know. Her chest tightened, a warmth blooming deep inside her despite the scars of her past. It was dangerous, this feeling, dangerous to her heart. But it was also the first spark of something she thought she'd lost forever. Hope. Days passed in fragile rhythm. Kaelin ensured she ate, ensured she rested, ensured she was never left to face the scornful glances alone. But the palace walls whispered with discontent. Servants lowered their eyes when he was near, but their tongues wagged in corners. She doesn't belong. She'll never be Luna. She'll drag him down. Selene heard them, each word like a blade, but Kalen's steady presence dulled the sting. He did not waver, though the storm around them gathered strength. And slowly, quietly, something delicate began to form between them. Her laughter returned in small moments, fleeting but real. His gaze softened when she spoke, his lips curving faintly in ways no one else ever witnessed. It was not yet love, but it was a promise, a fragile bridge over broken pieces. And for the first time, Selene began to believe she might one day cross it. But shadows do not rest when light begins to shine. In the depths of the palace, whispers turned to plans, plans turned to schemes. Some feared her presence, others despised her, and a few plotted to erase her entirely before she grew roots in the king's heart. The night of the feast came, a grand celebration where nobles and warriors filled the hall. Candles blazed, music soared, and food overflowed across gilded tables. Selene sat beside Kalen, still uneasy, her hands trembling as she lifted her cup. The gazes of the pack burned into her from every direction. She forced a smile, though her chest ached, though her stomach coiled with unease. A servant passed behind her, movements quiet, practiced, unnoticed by most, but his hand lingered too long at the pitcher. His eyes icked toward her cup, shadowed with intent. The liquid rippled as a silent drop slipped into the drink. Selene, unaware, lifted the cup closer to her lips, the sweet scent rising to meet her. At Kalen's side, the hall roared with laughter and clinking goblets, the celebration masking the danger at her fingertips. Her hand trembled slightly, the rim of the cup brushing against her mouth, and in the shadows, unseen eyes waited, cold and eager, for the poison to take hold. The cup hovered at her lips, the sweet scent brushing her nose. Her fingers trembled, unaware of the venom swirling just beneath the surface. She drew in a shaky breath, ready to drink, ready to mask the unease that always gnawed at her during the watchful eyes of Kalen's pack. But before the liquid could touch her tongue, a sudden wave of dizziness seized her. Her vision blurred, the laughter and music of the feast crashing into dissonant noise. The goblet slipped from her hand, clattering to the stone floor. Gasps rose around her as she swayed forward, her body buckling under an unseen weight. "Selene!" Kalen's voice thundered, sharp enough to silence the hall. She collapsed, the world spinning into shadows, her breath shallow, her skin clammy. The nobles rose from their seats, whispers spilling like wildfire. "An Omega dares faint at the king's table. She is weak, unfit, or cursed." Kalen's chair scraped loudly as he shot to his feet, fury radiating from every inch of him. "Summon the royal healer." His command shook the hall. No one dared delay. A healer rushed forward, kneeling quickly beside Selene. Kalen dropped down too, his hand gripping hers, his golden eyes blazing with a rage that made the air heavy. "She breathes," the healer murmured, fingers pressing her throat, "but her pulse is weak." Kalen's jaw tightened, his voice rough. "Then save her, now." The healer hesitated, glancing at Selene, then at Kalen, the weight of the king's fury pressing down like a storm. "Yes, my king." The hall had fallen into silence, every noble watching as Kalen, the Alpha King, knelt for a rejected Omega. It was a sight that sent ripples through the pack. Whispers slithered along the walls, hushed but poisonous. Why does he care? She's nothing but an Omega. He risks his throne for her? Kalen ignored them all. His focus was Selene, pale, trembling, her lips parted as shallow breaths escaped. Her hand twitched weakly in his grip, her lashes fluttering as if caught between life and death. "Stay with me," he growled low, his voice meant for her alone. The healer opened a satchel, pulling herbs and vials, his hands steady despite the tension that strangled the hall. A bitter-smelling tonic was pressed to her lips, Kaelin lifting her head carefully so she could swallow. Selene's throat convulsed, a soft cough breaking the silence as the liquid slid down. A flicker of color returned to her cheeks, faint but present. Kaelin exhaled, though his grip did not loosen. The healer's brow furrowed as he worked, mixing more powders, checking her pulse again and again. She was poisoned, he said finally, his voice grim but certain. Gasps rippled like thunder. Selene stirred, her eyes half opening, dazed and pained. The world blurred around her, but the one thing she saw clearly was Kaelin's face above her, fierce and unyielding. "I won't let them take you," he whispered, almost too soft for anyone else to hear. His thumb brushed against her hand, steady, grounding her against the tide of weakness. Selene wanted to speak, wanted to tell him she didn't deserve his protection, but her voice failed her. Her body sagged again, exhaustion claiming her as the healer worked tirelessly. The feast had dissolved into chaos now. Nobles muttered nervously, warriors exchanged sharp looks, suspicion crawling through the air. Some eyes gleamed with malice, others with fear. For the Alpha King had made his choice clear. Selene was under his protection. "Take her from the hall," Kaelin ordered at last, his voice cold steel. "I'll not have her die before me while cowards hide in shadows." The healer nodded quickly, signaling for attendants to bring a stretcher. But Kaelin's arms moved faster, lifting Selene himself as if she weighed nothing. The hall fell into stunned silence once more as he carried her out. Torches flared against the walls as Kaelin strode through the corridors, his steps echoing with fury. The healer followed, clutching his satchel, his eyes darting nervously at the king's back. In the privacy of the royal chambers, Selene was laid on the bed once more, her face pale against the sheets. The healer worked swiftly, grinding herbs, heating water, muttering incantations meant to cleanse the body. Kaelin stood like a sentinel at the bedside, arms crossed, his gaze unblinking. Every time Selene stirred, his eyes softened, but his jaw remained clenched with rage. Hours passed in a haze of fevered dreams. Selene twisted in her sleep, whispers escaping her lips, broken fragments of words. Her hands clutched her stomach protectively, as though shielding the child within. The healer frowned, leaning closer, his hand hovering above her womb. A strange pulse of energy pushed back, faint but undeniable. His breath caught, his eyes widening. Kaelin noticed instantly. "What is it?" he demanded, his voice sharp. The healer swallowed, lowering his voice, uncertain if he should speak. "My king, her child. There is power awakening within it, too early, far too early for a wolf unborn." Kaelin's gaze snapped to Selene, his expression unreadable as he looked at the fragile woman clutching life inside her. The healer leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper meant only for the king. "This is no ordinary child." The words struck like thunder in the quiet chamber. Kaelin's golden eyes narrowed, burning with a dangerous intensity. "This is no ordinary child," the healer had whispered, and the air itself seemed to recoil from the weight of that truth. Selene shifted in her fevered sleep, clutching her stomach protectively, as if her body instinctively shielded the life inside. Kaelin's gaze softened at the sight of her trembling hands, but his mind was already spiraling through the dangers that lay ahead. If others discovered the truth before she was ready, it would not only be her life at risk, but the child's as well. The healer straightened, bowing low. "My king, you must be careful. There will be those who see this child as a threat. They will stop at nothing to end it before it draws breath." Kaelin's jaw tightened, his voice low and edged with promise. "Then they will have to go through me." Outside the chamber walls, the palace buzzed with rumor. The feast had ended in chaos, whispers spreading like fire, poison, and Omega under royal protection, the king carrying her himself, and in the shadows beyond the palace, word traveled even farther. Across the borders, through the trees, carried by wolves who lurked unseen, Selene's name reached ears she had prayed would never hear it again. Her old pack, the ones who had cast her aside, who had mocked her cries, who had let her fall into exile. Her former lover sat at the head of their table, rage flashing in his eyes as the news was delivered. "She lives," the messenger said, his voice trembling. "And not just lives. She lies under the Alpha King's roof." A cruel silence followed, broken only by the sharp crack of a cup slamming against wood. "She was nothing," the beta snarled, his lips curling back. "A useless Omega. She should have died where I left her." But his words betrayed the fear twisting beneath his anger. For if Selene lived to speak, if the king discovered the truth of what they had done to her, their pack would crumble beneath shame. One of the elders leaned closer, voice cold as steel. "If the king accepts her, if she becomes his Luna, then everything we buried will surface. We will be posed. The beta's jaw clenched, his eyes burning with something darker than pride. "She cannot be allowed to rise. If she bears his heir, we are finished." Whispers turned to agreements, and agreements turned to plotting. Alliances were forged in the dark, rival packs called upon with promises of power. Selene, the rejected Omega, had become a threat far greater than she could imagine. Back in the palace, she stirred, her fever easing under the healer's care. Her eyes fluttered open, finding Kalen seated beside her, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword, as though guarding her even in the quiet of night. "Kalen," her voice was fragile, hoarse. He leaned forward instantly, relief flickering in his gaze. "You're safe," he said firmly, though his voice carried the weariness of a man who had been awake far too long. She tried to smile, but the heaviness in her chest weighed her down. "I'm not worth all this trouble." His jaw set, his golden eyes fierce. "You are worth more than you know, and I will not let anyone decide otherwise." The warmth in his words threatened to break her all over again, but this time, not from pain, from something far more dangerous. Her heart ached with the terrifying pull of trust. Days passed in fragile rhythm, but the atmosphere in the palace shifted. Warriors moved restlessly, their ears tuned for whispers of enemy movement. Kalen trained relentlessly, preparing his men, sharpening blades, strengthening defenses. He knew danger was coming. Selene could feel it too, a shadow creeping closer with every breath. Sometimes she caught the look in his eyes when he thought she wasn't watching. Protective, yes, but also burdened with the weight of something unspoken. Her child stirred within her, stronger each day, movements that felt almost too powerful, too aware. She pressed her hand against her belly often, a mixture of awe and fear stealing. Her breath. Kalen noticed, but said nothing. Yet the healer's words haunted him still. "This is no ordinary child." One night, while Selene sat by the window, gazing at the stars, a cold wind slipped through the curtains. She shivered, her instincts prickling, the hair on her arms rising. Something was wrong. She turned, her breath catching in her throat. A shadow moved where no one should have been. From the darkness stepped the one face she had prayed never to see again. Her former lover, the beta who had betrayed her, stood in the dim light of her chamber. His eyes burned with fury, his lips curling into a sneer. Selene froze, her heart hammering wildly in her chest. How did you get in here?" she whispered, her voice breaking. He stepped closer, his growl low, venomous. "That baby." His gaze dropped to her stomach, his voice laced with bitterness and claim. "That baby should have been mine." The torchlight flickered violently against the stone walls as Kalen burst into the chamber, his aura a storm of rage that made even the shadows recoil. Selene froze, her body trembling as her former lover stood before her, eyes gleaming with arrogance, lips curled in a cruel smirk. "That baby should have been mine," he had growled, and the words were still sharp in the air when Kalen's snarl ripped through the silence like thunder. With a single movement, the Alpha King lunged forward, his hand wrapping around the intruder's throat, lifting him effortlessly from the ground. The ex-lover's smirk faltered, replaced with panic, as Kalen's golden eyes burned with fury, his voice low and lethal. You dare step into my palace? You dare breathe near what is mine? The air grew heavy, the kind that pressed down on lungs until breathing felt impossible. Selene gasped, clutching her stomach, torn between horror and relief. Kaelin's grip tightened, bones cracking under the pressure, and for a moment she feared he would end the man's life right there. But then her voice, broken and trembling, pierced through his rage. Please, don't kill him. Kaelin's here. Dee snapped toward her, disbelief flashing across his features. Mercy? After everything this man had done to her, after abandoning her, humiliating her, betraying her. Yet Selene's eyes were wet with tears, her voice pleading, not for herself, but for the fragile spark of compassion she still carried. Kaelin's jaw clenched. His wolf howled for blood, but her whisper disarmed him. With a furious growl, he hurled the man to the ground like discarded trash. Guards stormed in, bows at the ready, but Kaelin's command was sharp and final. Take him to the dungeons, chain him in silver, let him rot until I decide what his fate will be. The guards dragged the broken figure away, his protests echoing down the halls. Selene sank against the wall, her knees weak, the reality of what just happened crashing down. Kaelin turned back to her, fury still simmering beneath his skin. But when his eyes met hers, something gentler surfaced. He knelt before her, his hand brushing over hers as though anchoring himself. You begged for his life, he whispered, the confusion lacing his words. After everything. Selene lowered her gaze. Killing him won't heal me. It won't protect the baby. It will only turn more hearts against you. Kaelin exhaled sharply, torn between his instinct to protect her through violence and the wisdom in her fragile plea. The following morning, the palace was restless. Word had spread like wildfire. Selene's former lover had been caught within the royal walls, rumors twisted into venom, tongues wagging of curses and doom. The council gathered in fury, their voices echoing through the grand hall. She endangers us all, one elder spat. Her presence will bring only war. Cast her out before the rival packs descend upon us. Others murmured their agreement, fear clouding their reason. All eyes turned to Kaelin, waiting for him to act like the ruthless king he was known to be. But Kaelin rose slowly, every movement deliberate, his presence filling the chamber until silence fell. His gaze swept across them, sharp as a blade. Then he spoke, his voice carrying a weight that made even seasoned warriors bow their heads. You think casting her out will protect you? You think I would abandon the one the moon goddess placed in my path? His tone darkened, steel hidden beneath velvet. Hear me clearly, Selene is mine, my mate, my queen. Any who dare question that, question me. Gasps rippled through the hall, shock etching itself into every face. An Omega, a rejected woman, declared as the Alpha King's mate? It was unthinkable, and yet, the conviction in his words left no room for challenge. Selene's heart thundered in her chest as she stood beside him, her hand trembling in his. But when she met his gaze, she saw no doubt there. For the first time in her life, someone wasn't ashamed to claim her. The pack was divided, half whispered in disapproval, half watched in silent awe, but none dared speak against their king. Days passed, tension mounting in the air like storm clouds ready to break. Scouts returned with grim news. Rival packs were stirring, alliances forming in secret. Selene's old pack fanned the flames of hatred, spreading word that the Alpha King had lost his judgment, blinded by a weak Omega. War was no longer a distant shadow. It was at their doorstep. Kaelin prepared, his warriors sharpening their blades, his generals drawing maps of blood and strategy. On the eve of battle, the palace was cloaked in silence. Torches burned low, banners fluttered in the cold wind, and the scent of steel and fear hung heavy. Selene stood at the balcony, watching Kaelin as he donned his armor, every movement precise, controlled, but she could see the weight on his shoulders. He approached her, his hand cupping her cheek, his thumb brushing away the tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "Stay safe within these walls," he whispered. "Promise me." But Selene's heart ached, for she knew safety was an illusion now. the horns of war sounded. At dawn, the battlefield stretched like a sea of wolves, claws and steel glinting beneath the blood-red sky. Kalen stood at the front, a storm of dominance radiating from him, his voice thundering commands that made the earth itself tremble. Selene watched from the fortress, every heartbeat a prayer, every breath a plea. Then it happened. Amid the clash of steel and the roar of wolves, a flash of silver cut through the chaos. Kalen fought like a god among men, but no god is untouchable. A blade, glistening with silver, found its mark. It sank deep into his side, and time seemed to shatter. Selene's scream tore through the air, her voice breaking across the battlefield as the Alpha King staggered, blood blooming across his armor like a crimson curse. His warriors surged around him, but the damage was done. The Alpha King, her Alpha, fell to his knees, his golden eyes dimming, his strength faltering, and as Selene's tears blurred her vision, one truth struck her heart with unrelenting force. She might lose the only man who had ever loved her. The Alpha King collapsed onto the battlefield, the silver blade lodged in his side, and Selene cried out his name as darkness threatened to take him. The battlefield was chaos, smoke rising, blood staining the earth, and the air thick with snarls and the clash of steel. Selene's scream tore through it all, raw and desperate, as she watched Kalen collapse, the silver blade still lodged in his side. Her body moved before thought, her legs burning as she rushed through warriors and fire to reach him. The world narrowed until all she could see was him, her Alpha King lying broken on the ground, blood soaking through his armor. She fell to her knees, hands trembling as she pressed against his wound, the metallic scent of blood clinging to her skin. "Don't leave me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Don't you dare leave me." Kael. Ian's golden eyes flickered, dimming like a fading flame, but even then they found her. Selene. His voice was hoarse, laced with agony. Her heart twisted as his body shuddered beneath her hands. Panic clawed at her chest, and then something deeper, something primal, surged within her. Her wolf, long dormant, rose in answer to her grief and love, no longer silent, no longer weak. It came like fire in her veins, spreading from her heart outward, igniting every cell. Her eyes burned, her breath turned into a growl, and the world around her seemed to shift. The ground trembled beneath her palms as power she didn't know she possessed rippled outward. Warriors on both sides froze, turning toward her as the rejected Omega radiated an aura so fierce, so untamed, it silenced the battlefield for a breathless moment. Her wolf had awoken. Selene lifted her head, eyes glowing with a wild silver light. She rose to her feet, her voice carrying across the chaos, clear and commanding. "Fight for your king! Fight for your pack! We do not fall tonight!" Her cry rang out like thunder, striking every warrior's heart. Kalen's men, who had faltered at the sight of their king wounded, straightened with renewed strength. They surged forward with her words echoing in their ears, rallying to her unexpected command. She stood at Kalen's side, her body trembling yet unyielding. In her womb, her child stirred, a heartbeat steady and strong, giving her a strength she hadn't known she possessed. She drew from it, from the love that bound her to Kalen, from the promise she'd made that no one would take this away from her. Energy pulsed through her veins, and with a roar that was both hers and her wolf's, she leapt into the fray. Her strikes were fueled by desperation, claws slashing, teeth bared. Those who mocked her weakness now saw the truth, an Omega no longer bound by chains of shame, but transformed by the fire of love. Her presence turned the tide, her power inspiring those around her. The enemy faltered, their fear growing as they faced not only Kalen's warriors, but the wrath of a woman they thought broken. Behind her, Kalen groaned, his body racked with pain. Yet he pushed himself upright, fury blazing in his eyes as he gripped the hilt of the silver blade and wrenched it free with a guttural snarl. Blood spilled, but his healing already sparked beneath his skin, fueled by his bond with Selene. He rose like a storm reborn, staggering toward the fight, his wolf refusing to surrender. When his gaze fell on Selene, fighting with unmatched ferocity, something in him roared to life. Together, they became unstoppable. Kalen's strikes were brutal, precise, fueled by his rage at the attempt to take her from him. Selene's power burned brighter, her wolf's cries echoing across the battlefield. Side by side, they cut through their enemies, their bond strengthening with each breath, each swing, each heartbeat. She was no longer the rejected Omega, and he was not a king fighting alone. They were mates, bound in battle, their love a weapon as sharp as any blade. The enemy packs began to crumble, their lines breaking under the combined fury of king and queen. Selene's former pack tried to rally, their leader barking commands, but fear spread faster than obedience. One by one, their wolves fell, until their cries turned from anger to terror. The ground ran red, and the last of their strength dissolved. At the heart of the battlefield, Selene stood beside Kalen, her chest heaving, her body trembling from exhaustion and power spent. His arms circled around her, steadying her, and their eyes met. For a fleeting moment, there was only them, the promise of love, the unspoken vow that neither would ever face the world alone again. Then the cries came, not of defiance, but of surrender. Her former pack crawled forward, their heads bowed, their voices shaking. Bloodied, broken, they dragged themselves through the mud until they knelt before Kalen and Selene. Their leader, the one who had once called her weak, dared not meet her gaze as he pressed his forehead to the earth. "Forgive us. We were wrong. We beg for mercy." Selene's heart thundered, her wolf snarling inside her chest. The sight of them kneeling, the same people who had once cast her out, mocked her, rejected her, struck something deep within her. They had called her nothing, they had left her to die, and now they knelt before her, their lives in her hands. Selene stood above her former pack, their pleas echoing in her ears as the power of choice burned in her chest. Would she show mercy, or deliver the justice they deserved? The battlefield was silent except for the ragged breathing of the defeated. Selene stood tall, her body aching, her heart pounding, as her former pack groveled in the dirt at her feet. The same voices that once spat venom now trembled with pleas for mercy. Their eyes flicked up only briefly, and when they met hers, they saw no longer the fragile, rejected Omega they had cast aside. They saw the glow in her gaze, the strength of her wolf alive within her, and the undeniable aura of power she carried as the Alpha King's mate. The air hung heavy with the weight of choice. Her wolf snarled, wanting blood, wanting justice for every wound they had carved into her soul. Memories struck hard, her humiliation at the ritual, the sting of rejection, the cruel words branding her unworthy. And yet, as she looked upon them now, weak and broken, something within her shifted. She no longer needed vengeance. She no longer needed their approval. She had Kalen. She had her child. She had a place where she belonged. Kalen stood beside her, his golden eyes burning, ready to end them with a single command if she wished. But his hand brushed hers, grounding her, silently asking her what kind of queen she would be. Selene's lips parted, her voice soft at first, then growing steady with each word. "You cast me out. You left me to die. But I will not become what you are. I will not rule with cruelty. I will not taint my child's future with the poer, son of revenge." She stepped forward, her presence commanding silence. "I show you mercy, not because you deserve it, but because I am no longer your Omega. I am your queen." Gasps rippled through both packs, her words striking deeper than any blade. Her former pack bowed lower, shame burning through them as their sins weighed heavier in the face of her mercy. Kalen's chest swelled with pride, his gaze never leaving her as he stepped closer. He lifted his hand, his voice thundering across the battlefield. "Hear me now. Before the blood of this war dries, before the moon goddess herself, Selene is my mate, my chosen, my fated, my queen. The crowd erupted, some in awe, some in disbelief, but none could deny the power of the moment. Kaelin removed the silver crown from his head, forged with the crest of his lineage, and turned to her. Slowly, reverently, he placed it upon her dark hair, his fingers lingering as though sealing a vow. From this day forth, you are Luna, queen of this kingdom, my equal, my heart, my strength. His voice broke at the edges, the unshakable king undone by the woman beside him. Tears blurred Selene's vision as the crown settled on her head, heavier than she expected, not just in weight, but in meaning. She was no longer the rejected girl mocked by her own people. She was no longer weak, no longer invisible. She was loved, honored, and chosen by the fiercest alpha the world had ever known. The warriors roared their approval, some dropping to one knee, others bowing their heads in reverence. Even those who once despised her had no choice but to acknowledge her rise. Kaelin's arm wrapped around her, pulling her close as the pack chanted her name. Selene, Luna Queen, Selene! The sound shook the very earth, washing over her like a tide. She closed her eyes, letting it fill the cracks in her soul, the wounds of rejection finally mended by acceptance greater than she had ever dreamed. For the first time in her life, she felt whole. Weeks later, the palace halls echoed with a different kind of cry, the newborn's first breath. Selene cradled her, baby in her arms, her tears falling freely as she pressed soft kisses to the tiny forehead. The child's heartbeat was strong, steady, filled with promise. Kaelin stood beside her, his hand resting gently over theirs, his face softened by awe. In that quiet chamber, there was no battlefield, no whispers of doubt, only love woven between them. Selene looked down at her child, her heart swelling until it hurt, then looked up at Kaelin. He bent close, his lips brushing her ear as he whispered words meant only for her. Our true war has just begun. Her breath caught, her gaze snapping to his, but his expression was unreadable, shadows lingering in his golden eyes. She understood then that though they had won this battle, darker storms loomed on the horizon. She held her baby tighter, her wolf stirring, ready to protect what was hers. And as Kaelin's hand found hers, their bond sealed not just by love, but by destiny. Selene knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. Selene sat crowned, her newborn in her arms, Kaelin's warning still echoing in her soul, as the winds of fate whispered that their story was only just beginning.